Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Cradle News Roundup, your one-stop shop for all news West Asia. My name is Esteban Carrillo. I am the head of news for The Cradle. As usual, I'm joined by my colleagues, content creator and writer for The Cradle, Karim Shami, and social media manager and content creator for The Cradle, Sima Itaim. So many things to discuss this week, many new developments. But let's start with a speech that was given by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu a couple of days ago, in which he outlined his ultimate goals for the genocidal war in Gaza and for what he continues to say would be total victory. Now, among these, the most striking of them, I guess, is his claim that a total victory would be to eliminate Hamas's governmental and military capabilities, return all of the captives, and then return all of the residents to the north. Now, any of these things on their own are a pipe dream at this point. Put together, it's simply not going to happen. At the very least, Israel has lost all sense of deterrence, first of all, right? Since 7 October. What Netanyahu is talking about is to returning to 6 October. He wants to just turn back the hands of time, pretend that Hamas and the rest of the Palestinian resistance hasn't kicked their ass in Gaza, pretend like Hezbollah hasn't established a military buffer zone in the north, and pretend like he cares about the return of the captives. Now, he made other pronouncements during this speech, including, he says that right now there's positive progress in the war, likely referring to this policy of assassinations, of targeted assassinations. He says no matter what happens, we will reach every Hamas leader. And we saw what happened over the weekend in Khan Yunis. We'll get into that in a second. But I just want to get your thoughts. What is Netanyahu doing by giving a speech at this point?
So it was a long-awaited press conference. That it was actually his first press conference in over 100 days. And it comes in the context of, I don't know if you guys remember, but we were again hearing that we were extremely close to a deal and the Biden administration was working on it and the Egyptians were saying that it was almost done and all of that. So I think the worse things get, the more Netanyahu is going to double down. And so before we get to the comments of the press conference, this came after already last week having reiterated his 4 non-negotiables, which also kind of, seemed like an attempt to scuttle the deal. And at that point, Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh said that we hold Netanyahu responsible if the talks collapse. So that those 4 non-negotiables before we go back to the press conference was that any deal will allow Israel to return to the fighting until its war aims are achieved. Number 2, weapons smuggling to Hamas from the Gaza-Egypt border will not be possible. Number 3, the return of thousands of armed terrorists to northern Gaza will not be possible. By armed terrorists, he means any men, basically. Just to be clear, because that's one of the things they've been discussing is that we need to allow the displaced to return north. So when he says no terrorists are allowed to return north, he means people. That's all he means. And then number 4, Israel will maximize the number of living hostages who will be returned from Hamas captivity, whatever that means. So those already set us on the path of, okay, this is still not going anywhere. Then the press conference kind of, sealed the deal with all the comments that you mentioned. And also this Al-Mawasi Khan Yunis massacre was justified by Netanyahu in this press conference.
Because here's where they supposedly targeted Mohammed Day, the one of the masterminds of the October 7 attacks. And now they're saying Hamas is like obscuring the information, that are not confirming that, maybe he was actually killed there. But we have seen this time and again, is government policy from Israel to conduct these massacres, to bomb schools, to bomb hospitals, to, not allow humanitarian shipments to enter Gaza, etc. So sadly, it's just part of the course for Israeli planners. And, Benjamin Netanyahu, who is just trying to hold on to power by any means necessary.
Yeah. So whether or not Mohammed Deif was the target, Mohammed Deif, the military leader of Hamas's Qassam brigades, and they say that they got his deputy, Rafi Salami, who is the Khan Yunis brigade commander, and that they were at a villa together, and that they had their eyes on Deif's deputy for a while, but they were waiting for Deif to come up from the tunnels and join him in the villa so that they could conduct the strike. Whether or not they actually did manage to assassinate his deputy, because Netanyahu said in this press conference that we have no confirmation that Deif was assassinated, but Israel has supposedly verified that his deputy, Salami, was assassinated. Whether or not they were the target, it doesn't justify the massacres. And the massacres are, as you said, part of a systematic policy to pressure Hamas in negotiations and to demonize Hamas in front of not just the masses, but the people of Gaza. And we've seen that their media is saying that this will help in negotiations. This will help bring us closer to a deal, but it will not help with the day after or weakening Hamas control of Gaza, even if Deif himself was assassinated. And let me remind the audience that Deif has survived at least 7 attempts on his life by Israel over the past decades. So he justifies the massacre, says that he gave its blessing because he made sure there were no Israeli hostages there, so it was okay. And Israeli media is also saying that it was mainly Hamas militants that were killed in the Mawasi massacre, when in reality the civil defense came out and said that over 50% were women and children. But of course, it's Hamas gunmen in the compound, and that was the majority of who had died, according to Israeli media. So this press conference, I don't know what you think about this, Karim, but this seals the deal that there's no chance for an agreement, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, 100%. First, I want to say that you said that he wants to go back to 6th of October. I think he wants to go back to 1986, where Israel was occupying that percent of Lebanon, of the south, till the Litani River, and before the creation or the establishment of Hamas, because Hamas was established in 1987. What he said is impossible. First, eliminating Hamas is impossible, because now Hamas is stronger than ever. Hamas is gaining popularity, not only in Gaza, but across the Arab world. And so it's impossible to eliminate Hamas, because, as we said, it's an ideology and it's gaining popularity. And if at the start of the war, many reports said that there are like 50,000 fighters. But now, as many reports came out, and we know that each and every individual in Gaza has either a relative who is dead or injured. Mm-hmm. And this will also...
It replenishes their fighting force.
Yes, 100%. And if somebody is not in Hamas, he will join Hamas to fight Israel. Or maybe if he's not working because there's nothing to do in Gaza, it's like better for him to join Hamas. So that's the first section that I oppose in his speech. And then he said that he wants to eliminate their military capabilities. And we know Hamas from 2014 and 2021, they said that the weapons that they have and they will manufacture, big percentage of them are from the Israeli army, are weapons and missiles that misfired or that were damaged and didn't explode. So I think after this war, Hamas will be even more powerful and will be able to manufacture more weapons or more artillery shells or even. And he talked also about the captives, that he wants to free captives. But everybody knows that Israel, till at this point, after 9 months, they killed more captives, more than the people that they freed. Yani last time they freed 3. I think this was the only successful operation, although they killed also...
In Nusayrat.
In Nusayrat, yeah. They freed 3 or 4 captives, but they killed with them 100 Palestinians and also 2 or 3 other captives.
Almost 300 Palestinians.
I mean, the massacres are non-stop. You know, this weekend was complete a weekend of horror in Gaza, although, you know, you can say the past 9 months have been the 9 months of horror for the people of Gaza. About over 90% of them displaced. No, actually, it's like 1.9 million of them displaced. Almost the entirety of the Strip displaced multiple times. Right? Families have been moving up to more than 10 times. When they, over the last week, when they were telling people to evacuate Gaza City before they started shelling it again, there were families who refused. We just said, like, why would we leave? Because what is the point? There's no safe zones in Gaza. And that brings us to what happened over the weekend when they bombed Khan Yunis, allegedly targeting Mohammed Day. They bombed several UNRWA schools, several safe zones, right? They tell the Palestinians, go here, this is a safe zone. Then 1 day, 2 days later, the bombs start dropping on the safe zone. There's no such thing as safety in...
But they investigate.
They do investigate, yes. They investigate. We never find out what the results are. There's never any culprits. There's never any punishment. But there are investigations indeed.
I mean, at this point, I think they are, they've stepped up their attacks on these facilities that hold these Palestinians seeking shelter on purpose. They think that this policy is going to get Hamas to weaken in negotiations or even give everything up. Yesterday, they bombed another school, also in Nusayrat camp, the site of the rescue massacre that took place earlier on. And then, basically, at least 22 people were martyred in this. And this comes after last week us seeing reports that 4 schools were bombed in 4 days. These schools are being bombed nonstop, and it's always because there's a militant or there's a room that they were in or there's a this or there's that. And it always comes out that none of that is true.
I mean, we saw the report on 972 magazine, right, in which these 6 Israeli soldiers talk about how there's no firing regulations. It's just like a free-for-all. And one of the most striking things from this, because we are aware of the violence that has been unleashed on the Palestinians. You cannot deny it. You cannot pretend like, this is news for anyone, really. But what they said, these soldiers, was like that they were on their coming under constant friendly fire. Like, because there's no restrictions, these soldiers are just firing at anything that moves, just out of boredom. They have nothing else to do. They're burning houses. And they just open fire, and then they talk about how some squadrons all of a sudden just come under fire, and it's from their own army. So this is, again, to go back, this is Israeli government policy. Israeli government policy to make sure Gaza is in the entirety of it is an extermination zone, to make sure that there's constant displacement, to have 2 million people just like moving like as a mass around the strip, hoping that today is not their day. And then also, just to quickly mention, the policy of starvation. The starvation as a weapon of war. Aid has been barely trickling into Gaza since the start of May. Since Hamas, again, I will not tire of saying this, since Hamas accepted the terms of a ceasefire deal that was underwritten by the CIA director. This is how Israel responded. They took control of the Rafah crossing. They stopped the entry of aid, and they started, decimating the parts of Gaza that they had claimed they wouldn't. There would be very targeted attacks. We now know that's simply not the case. And at the same time, just to quickly mention, the U.S. aid pier, right? This big idea from the Biden government that was supposed to be daring and like, we will help the people of Gaza, and so on and so forth, is dead. It's gone. They tried to reattach it last week. It didn't work.
Yeah, they said they were going to reattach it before permanently dismantling it, and even that reattachment didn't work out. And all of this is after, as you reminded me, after having barely delivered enough food for even 1 day needed in Gaza. This whole time. Not even enough food for 1 day.
And this is where the dishonesty comes from in Western media. Because in Western media, it's constantly reported, they say, the U.S. Army says they've delivered 19.4 million tons of aid to Gaza. My God, 19.4 million tons, that's a lot, right? But it's not. It's about just over 500 truckloads of aid.
Maybe they weigh the boxes.
Maybe they weigh the trucks.
And some of it's seized anyway.
No, more than that, and in particular in the case of the pier, the aid that entered, these between 500 and 600 truckloads, that is enough for 1 day of food, as you say, Sima, they didn't even make it into the hands of Gazans. It just like landed at the beach, and it rotted under the sun, the same way that the food is rotting under the sun and in the Egyptian side of the border. And you have these settler groups, whatever little shipments are allowed to come in, you have the settler groups blocking it, or opening up the bags of flour, just destroying it. Again, Israeli government policy to make sure that there's as little survivors from this horrible war. And again, maybe just to stay for a bit on this whole talk about the negotiations, Hamas yesterday had to come out and say and deny Western media reports that were claiming they had withdrawn from the negotiations, which is, again, this PSYOPs campaign that you have Benjamin Netanyahu come out and give a speech, or multiple speeches, because the one where he talked last week, it was also an attempt to sabotage the talks. When he does this, it's not really presented as Israeli Prime Minister is sabotaging the talks, whatever. No, it's always just like presented like he wants to get his captives back. And then Hamas is always being accused of being intransigent, of having sticking points because they want guarantees, of withdrawing from the talks. You know, honestly, the Palestinians have every reason to withdraw from these talks because what guarantee is there for them, and what guarantee they're continuing to conduct these horrible massacres day in, day out, and they just want them to sit at the negotiating table and wait it out.
Look, yeah, and this time it's nonsensical because all these sources that came out, you had AFP citing an unnamed Hamas official that said that Hamas had withdrawn from the negotiations. You had Egyptian sources saying to Al-Ikhbariyya that they had withdrawn from the negotiations. And the thing is, this time actually, these unnamed sources were citing the Mawasi Khan Yunis massacre as the reason for withdrawing from these negotiations. Now, of course, that is a valid reason to withdraw from negotiations, but Hamas doesn't want to withdraw from negotiations because Hamas has a duty to stop the aggression on its people. It's actually exactly what Netanyahu wants. So Hamas said they're not going to give Netanyahu what he wants, that what AFP said wasn't true, and we won't give him what he wants. And they, again, when it comes to that press conference, they addressed those comments, and when it comes to Mohammed Deif, they said Deif is mocking you right now. And Khalil Haya, the deputy to Yahya Sinwar, said, Mohammed Deif is mocking your statements right now, and he referred to his press conference as miserable. So Hamas will not give Netanyahu that satisfaction, no matter how many massacres he commits. I mean, at the end of the day, why would they withdraw when they want to stop these massacres? They've now they've warned that if the talks collapse, because we feel maybe they might collapse, even though they've denied that will be completely Israel's responsibility. And they've called on the mediators and the international community, the non-existent international community, to get Israel to halt these massacres so that negotiations can progress.
You know what's interesting about this whole situation as well is that Israel is not really negotiating from a position of power. Obviously, the massacres being committed in Gaza, the calamity that has been dropped on top of the Palestinians there, it's because Israel has these U.S.-supported military prowess to do such things. But Israel is collapsing. Internally, Israel is collapsing. It was collapsing before October 7th. We talked about this before multiple times, with the judicial overhaul, with the race of Al-Aqsa, with the growth of the extreme, settler movements that are celebrating what's happening in Gaza and taking over the West Bank. But now, after 7 October, Israel has been hurt very badly economically as well. Right? We had a report last week that went viral, in which Israeli media reports that 46,000 businesses have been forced to close in Israel since October 7. We've already seen before the pain that it has inflicted on the economy, on the Israeli shekel. Again, before October 7, you had tech companies leaving Israel. After that, it just accelerated. You also have the port of Eilat in the south. That it's bankrupt. It has gone bankrupt. It's asking for money and can no longer operate. On top of all of this, also compounding it, it's the reservists, right? Because it's the attacks from Yemen, right, and the attacks from Hezbollah and the emptying out of the northern settlements. But the Israeli army depends, and honestly, it just depends completely on the reservist force, right? Because the active duty members are not enough, so they need to call up reservists. And when they call up reservists, who are they calling up? They're calling up the working force. And at this point, it's been 9 months, right? 9 months that you have this. And why are we not hearing more about this? Why is it like we pretend, not we, the West pretends, like what Netanyahu is saying and what Israel is trying to do it's like what they are supposed to do, right? The right to self-defense.
Right.
But they're like, this right to self-defense is killing them.
Yeah, well, the reason we don't hear about the economic situation in Israel is because, they need to keep this machine going. They want to still show it as untouchable. It's the same reason we don't hear about how many Israeli soldiers are being killed. It's the same reason we don't hear about the U.S.'s defeat in the Red Sea, because the war machine and its image needs to keep going, and the U.S. is scrambling to keep Israel afloat and to save its image and to save it security-wise. And that, after the al-Mawasi Khan Yunis massacre, not only did Yemen threaten to expand its operations, a source in the Iraqi resistance told al-Mayadi that they too have threatened to expand their operations and have actually started to increase their operations. These fronts, Lebanon, Yemen, Iraq, the pressure will only mount, as all the internal pressure will only mount, and the U.S. is desperate to keep Israel and its image afloat. You know, you had last week, Israel will not exist in 2026 if Netanyahu remains in power. Lieberman said that last week. Now, some may find this a controversial opinion, but despite all the inconceivable horror that we've witnessed over the past year, Netanyahu is, in fact, our greatest hope for the most rapid downfall of this illegitimate occupation state. You know, we always criticize this smokescreen, this anti-Netanyahu campaign, as though Israel's existence and military occupation isn't the real problem or the root of the problem, as if this suffering hasn't been taking place since the land was first occupied, as if you got rid of Netanyahu, everything would just be better. Anyone who makes this about Netanyahu and not about the occupation is scared for Israel and defends Israel's existence. So personally, I'm not anti-Netanyahu. I'm anti-Israel. I want the end of Israel. That's why I'm actually pro-Netanyahu. If you think there would have been no genocide without Netanyahu, you're very mistaken, because genocide is Israel's nature, because he will lead Israel to its end. And this is why the U.S. is scrambling, you know, whether in 2026, like Lieberman claimed, whether in 2027, like Ahmad Yassin claimed, or when Lubavitch Rebbe said after Bibi becomes the Messiah. In my opinion, Netanyahu's destiny is to be the last prime minister of the Israeli occupation. But it seems that the U.S. isn't going to let that happen, and that's why they're scrambling to prop Israel back up on its feet.
Yeah, the problem is that they don't know when to stop. Especially if he has these goals in his heart, he will never stop or because he can't accomplish them. And as you said, the most important thing is the image of Israel, because Israel exists because of the image that they portrayed in the mentality of the West, that they are the most the only democratic country in the world, although Lebanon is pretty much democratic also, and you have many places. No, not really. Here in Lebanon, if you don't know, you can place Israel and place Hezbollah at the same TV show. This only happens in Lebanon. So we are also considered as a democratic country, and also because of the image, they say that Israel is the heaven for Jews and for the Americans after they graduate, and they got these old people to Israel, and they also pay them and push them to be citizens of Israel. And now, if they talk about the real image of Israel, that the companies are closing, people are losing their jobs, and that the second major port in Israel, which is Eilat port, is not functioning now. And I read a report that the last ship that went to Eilat was at the beginning of this year. And also, they will not, as Sima said, they will not blame Israel as an entity. They will always blame Sharon. They would blame Netanyahu, because as if he's the bad person, as they did, for instance, when they teach us in Western media about Hitler, they say Nazi Germany. They don't say Germany, as if what happened is only about one guy, which is Hitler, not the mentality of the millions that were behind him. Exactly. Now there's millions and millions more outside of Israel with Netanyahu, because of course of the hatred for Arabs and for Muslims that are being portrayed in Hollywood and other places, and even from officials and the politicians in the media against this region, especially against Muslims. And the only reason is because they want Israel to be the best country, or to show Israel as if it's the best country.
Exactly. So, I think your comparison with Lebanon is very interesting, because in this report about the 46,000 businesses closing, they talk about that Israel is in a situation when there's effectively no foreign tourists. Nobody's going to Israel. Lebanon is chock full of tourists at the moment, right? Despite the war, despite everything that's happening in the south, Lebanon just continues to go.
Despite the threat.
Despite the threats.
Yeah, because it's the opposite. Here, if somebody works outside and he's like from Lebanon, he comes back in the summer to see his family. But in Israel, it's the opposite. And if something happens in Israel, you have to go back to Poland to see your family. So it's
Yeah.
It's the opposite.
They're opposites in many ways.
There's still so much more that we haven't talked about that we're not going to have a lot of time to go through this in detail. But, the West Bank is also a growing threat as a front, and there was a recent report. I know Karim disagrees with me that the West Bank resistance is a threat to Israel, but they cannot afford to let it go or take their eyes off of it for one moment. There was a recent report about that Israel fears the Lebanonization of the West Bank and likens the West Bank resistance in its growth to Hezbollah in the 90s in South Lebanon and how they confronted Israeli vehicles. And this is, like with explosives getting more sophisticated. Aside from that, you have in the 48 territories operations being carried out, like the soldiers that were killed in the mall, like the operation yesterday that was near Ramle, where you had those soldiers that were very badly injured, one of them an officer, in a car ramming operation near a military base. And then the Mujahideen movement actually claimed responsibility for that. These things, after Abu Ubaida's latest speech where he said this nightmare is inevitably coming not only to the West Bank, but to the 48, all of this adds pressure, a lot of pressure. Israel can't afford to take its eyes off of any of these fronts, even in the 48 where they have people beaten into submission, Palestinians beaten into submission, the 48 Palestinians, they still can't rest because the resistance is there. Resistance cells are present there. And between the West Bank and the 48, it's not looking very promising for them when it's added to all this mounting pressure.
But here's the thing, because it just kind of goes to further prove that when it comes to the colonizing mind, to the mind of a colonizer, they never seem to actually understand resistance. They never seem to understand how it works and why it exists. So even in these territories where, as you're saying, the Palestinians have essentially just been beaten into submission, the resistance is gonna pop up. It's gonna grow at some point, like you said, Karim, right? Like if they kill your family, if they kill your friends, you're gonna find it in yourself. You're gonna find the bravery. You're gonna find the will to pick up a weapon, whatever that weapon may be, and defend yourself. And just to go back, to this idea of self-defense. Under international law, Israel as a military occupation doesn't have the right to self-defense against the Palestinians, while the Palestinians do have the right to seek their liberation by any means necessary. And I do agree with you, Seema, on this idea of the West Bank. And this is also why the West Bank is being taken over in the way that it has. Right now, when you look at a picture of the West Bank, it's completely taken over. It's completely taken over by settlements, by Israeli-controlled areas. There's no... the idea with the settlements is to cut off everything, to make, all of the Palestinian villages that are left, Palestinian towns, separated from everything else so that they can just be taken over. And that's where you're seeing the officials, approving the more settlement constructions, the expansions, the legal expansion of settlements. And you have the EU and you have the US, like a shaking their finger and going like, oh, we don't like this, but they don't do anything.
Exactly.
Right?
Since Oslo.
They will investigate also.
They will continue to investigate for as long.
But think about it. They succeeded in separating Gaza from the West Bank, from the 48. Now they zoom in micro into the West Bank to separate the West Bank from the West Bank. And it's endless. It's like these islands.
I just want to defend myself because Seema said that I don't believe in West Bank resistance. There's a fact. I don't believe that they will do any harm to Israel or any significant harm because the existence of Jordan and the King of Jordan, who's doing a fantastic job, not from now, since the 90s, since his father and his grandfather, which their main role is to protect the borders of Israel. And we know what also the role of Jordan was in April 13 when
Iran launched
their missiles and drones against Israel, and we saw how he preferred to down the missiles on the heads of his own people in the cities rather than letting them pass into Israel. So this man is like a hero for every Jew or Zionist in the world, and he controls the borders with the West Bank. That's why I don't believe that anything or significant will come from there.
I see what you're saying, because you have in your mind a standard of what harming the Israeli occupation looks like. But harm can take many different forms. killing settlers or soldiers harms the machine as overall. And we hear sometimes about, of course, Jordan's main role, is to protect Israel, and we know this. But, we hear sometimes about these weapons smuggling operations that were thwarted across the border. Think about all the times that they were not caught and that weapons did go into the West Bank from Jordan. That's happened a lot. If it were so relaxed there for them, they wouldn't be raiding that often. They don't just do it for fun. And that's not me defending the Israeli occupation, but they are constantly on guard there. Of course, they're not going to deal the same harm that you would if you compare to Gaza or if you compare to Hezbollah. But it's not a relaxed situation at all for the occupation. That's my only point.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if you know that Gaza is like 20 times or 30 times smaller than the West Bank, now people will understand what I mean.
But Gaza was liberated in a sense, even though it was under siege. But there were no,
When West Bank is liberated or whatever happens in Jordan, then I will agree with you. But till now, I see what they are doing is like.
So, I think it's just, we've gone into the topic of Jordan for a while now, but I just want to highlight something, right? You have the Jordanian security services aiding the Israeli occupation in interrogating the Palestinians in the West Bank. And just this week, we at the Cradle published this video of a Palestinian prisoner, Moasis Abayat, who was released in the most horrific condition that you could ever imagine a human being, or you're seeing a human being, not just broken down physically, but also broken down mentally, right? And this is the conditions of how Palestinian prisoners are kept by Israel. So, for Jordanian security services to come in and be like, we'll work alongside you, and this is what you do to the people who, share a lineage with us, who share an identity with us. It just speaks volumes, honestly. It just speaks volumes about that country.
That prisoner, and yes, prisoner, not hostage. I want to make this clear, actually, because we're going to get people in the comments saying, they're hostages, they're not prisoners, they're not hostages. Any Palestinian in Palestine does not call the Palestinian detainees or prisoners hostages. Hostage situation is actually a much easier situation because that means Israel kidnaps a Palestinian, asks for something in exchange, and that Palestinian can be released when you fulfill that condition. That is not the case. Israel keeps them without a trial or charge for as long as it wants. So there's this new trend where people online are calling them hostages, diaspora Palestinians, Westerners. They're not hostages. Call them whatever you want. Not all prisoners are criminals. Prisoners can be people who are imprisoned by an enemy or a criminal. So yeah, they're prisoners. So these prisoners, Muazzez speaks and represents thousands that are in these torture centers right now. The man thought he was dead. The man didn't know if he was dead or alive. He thought he was dead. That's how badly he was tortured. This was in the Naqab, the Negev desert prison, and he had also been transferred from prison to prison. And this is happening on a daily basis. We have prisoners who have died, been killed. Prisoners are if they have cancer, their cancer treatment is intentionally neglected. No food, no clean water. Beyond, if you think solitary confinement is bad, it goes beyond any punishment you can think of. And it doesn't matter whether, because of a large majority of these Palestinians haven't done anything. And then even the ones who have done things like resistance operations and killed Israelis, does that excuse depriving them of cancer treatment or starving them? But I mean, look at the prisoner in America, in the USA. Do you think the serial killer doesn't get to eat or doesn't get his cancer treatment?
No, it depends. I look at the prisoners in Guantanamo. It's the same.
Exactly. Or Abu Ghraib.
Yeah, but that's what these prisoners are saying. They want to get from Negev prison or Teiman. They say, this is worse than Guantanamo. This is worse than Abu Ghraib.
Yeah, Muazzez called it Guantanamo, the Naqab prison.
Yeah, no, and honestly, just like the one thing you need to look at is the state of the Israeli captives who get released or who get rescued. And you put the before and after picture of them, and it's the same person. You put the before and after picture of the Palestinian prisoners. You cannot recognize him. You just simply cannot recognize them.
Yeah, the man was he was a weightlifter. He was he was an athlete. And is the video shattered me. I was incapacitated for 3 days, not because of him, because he is so many people. He represents so many people that are suffering inconceivable.
And he was a strong man, and that's what happened to him. And a normal guy won't even survive such inhumane actions.
And we don't know. We don't really know what's happening inside. I mean, we know from the accounts, but we don't know the actual death toll from these torture camps. Okay, so before we finish this week, there's one last topic I would like us to discuss, and it relates to probably the biggest news from the weekend, which of course was the assassination attempt against former U.S. President Donald Trump. In the platform, because after his assassination, you saw a lot of these, social media influencers like, quote unquote, anti-imperialist, anti-Zionist from the U.S. come out and say, like, God save President Trump, and et cetera, and like, let's rally for Trump, et cetera, et cetera. Ignoring the fact, first of all, that Donald Trump is probably as big a Zionist as Joe Biden.
If not bigger.
Ignoring the fact that, Donald Trump was behind the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, of Abu Mahdi al-Mohandis, these anti-terror icons, who was, just did all of these horrible things for this region and for the rest of the world, honestly, right? He even was, his administration was when these U.S.-backed agents tried to kill the Venezuelan president Nicolas Maduro with drones. He also recognized the occupied Syrian Golan Heights as Israeli territory and moved the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, essentially, giving it de facto recognition as the capital of the Zionist state. So why do I bring this up? Because as we are recording this in a few hours, the Republican National Convention is set to start, right, where Trump is going to come in as essentially the conservative messiah, right? Although, conservative, liberal, these levels have very little meaning, honestly. Biden, Trump, two sides of the same coin. So Israel is the only country that is named explicitly in the platform for the Republican government in 2024, and is also a country in which it said that they will continue to receive funding, right? The funding that the U.S. constantly gives to Israel, maybe even get more. And this is supposedly a government, right? The Trump administration is a government that it wants to cut aid to Ukraine. He just wants to end the Ukraine war. He wants to exit NATO, or at the very least get the other NATO nations to start giving more money. He's asking everyone, you gotta start paying up because we won't give any money. But when it comes to Israel, it's like, no, you will get anything you want and more.
Yeah, like without unconditionally, just the unshakable, constant. It might as well be in the Constitution.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, now it's U.S. law, no? To criticize Israel is to be an anti-Semite. What is the difference, honestly? What is the difference, honestly, when, a U.S. citizen goes to the battle and he sees, a senile Joe Biden who cannot string a sentence together, and, Donald Trump missing half of his ear, who is also a man that is not known to be a public speaker, to not know, to what is his platform, right? No, Donald Trump, besides just like gibberish and hate spewing, you're voting for two people who in the end are going to represent the same thing.
Yeah, but they think he's against the establishment because he has these if he's elected president, he'll stop the Ukraine war. But as far as I'm concerned,
he can't stop that.
No, first of all. Second of all, the Israel by itself is enough. The Israel thing by itself is enough to show you that he is not against the establishment in any way. They like him. They think he's the baddest. Oh, fight. And it's always, he's controversial. He says things as they are. He doesn't sugarcoat them. So everyone's like, oh, Trump.
In his last term, he said that he wants to withdraw from Syria. And the estimates are that there are only from 2,000 to 5,000 military personnel in Syria, and they didn't allow him. When they asked him why he didn't go out from Syria, he said, they didn't allow me.
I mean, he goes against the grain in some things, like wanting to withdraw from Syria or wanting to stop the Ukraine war, but that doesn't make him fully against the establishment. You just have these different elites, the elites who fund Biden are not the elites who fund Trump, and there's some conflicts of interest, but it's all the same show at the end of the day. That's how I see it. I don't know how you see it. I mean, why they may have tried to assassinate Trump.
Yeah, and still there's still 4 months till the election.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can try to assassinate him once every month at least, then we'll see.
We'll see. But I think, in the end, what this whole attempt showed was that, everybody just gave him the presidency after, right? Everybody was saying, like, now he won. He won. Like, no more questions. Why even hold an elections? Just giving the presidency.
But it's the same as Israel. As she said, it doesn't matter who rules Israel today, like Netanyahu, they will also commit the same massacres and the same. So whoever comes as a president of the United States, the number one thing he should, the number one fact should be that he supports Israel. It's the same.
I mean, Netanyahu wins big if Trump is elected president. If they let Trump be elected president, I don't know. You know me. I'm the resident conspiracy theorist. I think it could have been an inside job, but I see why you guys don't think that.
I mean, I don't think we should get into that.
No, that's not. It's off the plate.
It's gonna take us, on a huge tangent. But I don't see any difference, as you're saying, Karim, right? Like whether Biden wins, whether Trump wins, the situation here in regards to Israel, it's going to be the same, right? A month ago, we were talking about Netanyahu trying to hold on to power until the U.S. election. Why? Because he feels he has more affinity to Donald Trump. But besides the fact that Joe Biden, while he still had some sense left in him, didn't seem to like, really, Netanyahu, right? It was very obvious animosity there. I didn't stop him from going after 7 October, hugging the man, and they're just giving him, shipments of 2,000-pound bombs every 4 days.
I think it's the same as when you don't like your boss. Whatever, if you like him or not, you will fulfill whatever he says.
That's so true.
It's the same. It's the same thing. Yeah, and let's not forget that Israel has the power of Epstein. It's like a superpower. It's called Epstein power.
The Epstein files.
The blackmail power.
Yeah, true. There are Mossad ties there. We have known that for a while. But I think, we should leave it there. Maybe you can continue in the comments. You can tell us what you think about the situation. We would love to hear from you. And please make sure to subscribe, to leave a like, to share this video, to follow us on X, on Instagram, on Telegram, and to check out our Patreon. Maybe leave a donation for us there. For the Cradle News Roundup, my name is Esteban Carrillo. I have been joined by Karim Shami and Sima Itair.